Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn how to deploy and provision SIP terminals with Inform Voice. There are two ways to provision terminals with Inform Voice. The first one is the one that actually we recommend, is what we call the managed SIP terminal. With this method, we configure Inform Voice administrator with the terminal itself using its MAC address. We can do it manually or we can do it through import. And we import a list of MAC addresses with its related username, station, number, etc. Those configuration files are stored in Inform Voice, either system-wide configuration files or MAC-specific configuration files. So we take the terminal out of the box. We connect the terminal to a PoE switch, and the first thing the terminal is going to do is try to get an IP address from a DHCP server. So we can configure that DHCP server with options, and one of those options is the address of a provisioning server, which is Inform Voice. The terminal will receive configuration files from Inform Voice, and one of the information included in that configuration file is the address or addresses of the SIP servers the terminal needs to register to. So if we do all things right, we can take a terminal out of the box and end up with a terminal being online connected to Inform Voice. So it would be that easy. So we need to figure out the brands and models of terminals that Inform Voice supports as managed. Well, there is a spreadsheet included in the documentation set of Inform Voice that's called Inform Voice Compatibility Mega Matrix. That includes each brand and model of terminals and the features that the brand and model of terminal supports. This mega matrix not only gives terminal information, it gives a lot of other system requirements. It's a very useful resource when it comes to Inform Voice. So remember this matrix. And for every version of Inform Voice that Forerunner released to the market, this matrix is being updated. So please consider keeping the information updated as Forerunner is releasing versions of the product. The second way to connect terminals to Inform Voice is through non-managed SIP terminals, which means we need to access the terminal's web browser generally and configure in the local configuration of the terminal, which is the SIP register address, which is our Inform Voice address. So at this point, the terminal will attempt to register. Inform Voice will validate the user agent header that it's being contained in that register message against a list that's shown here in the screenshot. Is on the System Properties SIP tab. If the user agent is in the list, Inform Voice will add the terminal information into the database. It will present the new terminal in the Stations tab on Inform Voice Administrator. So at this point, we are able to complete the information by adding authentication information, the user, and everything. And once we finish, the terminal will re-register to Inform Voice. Inform Voice will accept the registration, and then the terminal will become online. If the terminal is not in the list that I showed before, can we still use the terminal? Yes, we can use the terminal. But we need to figure out how does the terminal identify itself. So we need to sniff packets, look for the register message. We can do it through uh, pickup captures that the terminal might provide through its web administration or through log files that we can grab from InformVoice, or we can even um, connect or install a packet capture in the InformVoice server like Wireshark. And we find the register message, we find the user agent information, so we can add this user agent into the list, and at this point, the terminal will be able to be recognized by InfoVoice, and we can complete the configuration and everything. Another point that I wanted to mention in this presentation is um, the voice VLAN. We generally need to have our voice implementation separate from the data network. So we normally suggest the customers to use a separate VLAN. In order for the terminals to read the VLAN information, VLAN tagging is a very, very good way, because we just specify in the switch a data VLAN and a voice VLAN, and we let the terminal read that information using CDP or LLDP. So we don't need to worry about additional information to be added to any configuration. Uh, there are other ways to do it. There are DHCP options that the brands and models of terminals support to get the VLAN information, but I mean, my own experience using VLAN tagging is the best way to go. So let's dive a little bit into the three steps I mentioned at the beginning when we talked about managed SIP terminals. So the step one is to receive the options from the DHCP server. Okay, what specific options do we receive? Well, it turns out that the SIP terminals don't get its date and time from the InformVoice server. They need to get it from a time source, what we call a time server. So one of the DHCP options we feed the terminals is the time server. Usually terminals use either the option 004, which is called time server, or the option 042, which is called NTP server. Together with that, we need to specify what time zone is the terminal in. And this is done through another option called GMT offset, which is the option 002. Um, the way that the GMT offset is specified is a little bit particular, especially when we deal with negative GMTs, like in the US, like we have minus 4, 5, 6. So the best way is go on the internet and search for option 00, DHCP option 002 GMT offset, and you will see exactly how to specify it for your particular time zone. Basically is specified in number of seconds, but as the numbers are negative in the US, the way to specify negative numbers in binary is when the most significant bit is a 1. This is why you can see Fs at the beginning. So this is a little insight on how to specify the number, but you can look on the internet and find which value you need, and that's it. There is another useful option called syslog server. Syslog is a protocol basically to get login information. Terminals are able to output that login information for debugging purpose. So in case something happens and we need to figure out what happens with a terminal, we can use syslog to check it. And now we get to the actual important information. In case of non-managed terminals, I mentioned that we need to go to the local administration and enter the SIP registrar there. Well, we can let the terminal get its information from the DHCP option using the option 120, which is called SIP servers. There is a specific syntax that we need to follow for the SIP server, so you can check the internet on how it is. But that basically works for non-managed terminals. For the managed terminals, the one that needs the information of the provisioning server, we use option 66. Option 66 will give the terminal the information of what's called the boot server or the provisioning server. So let's go a little bit deeper into the format of option 66. As you can see here in the screenshot, the DHCP server gives the information in different ways. It is a string. We can put whatever we want, but the terminal interprets the information differently depending on the way we write it, as shown here in the screen. If we just enter an IP address, the terminal will assume that the protocol to connect to InformVoice is FTP for downloading the files. The same if we use the name of the server, the FQDN, and we prepend that name with FTP : //. Other phone brands and models provision themselves using HTTP or HTTPS, which InformVoice also supports. But in that case, we need to specify a non-default port number for it. In case of HTTP, we need to specify port 9080 using : after the FQDN. And if we use HTTPS, we need to specify for port 9443 to grab the configuration files. Obviously, we need to specify the protocol at the beginning, prepending the FQDN. So here are the different ways to specify either protocol or and address of our InformVoice as provisioning server. Okay, let's go to the step 2. Once the terminal got the information of the provisioning server, it connects and requests and downloads configuration files. The configuration files are basically brand specific and even model specific. InformVoice knows the names of the files that it will be requested to download or to upload. And obviously, because all those managed terminals were configured in the InformVoice administrator. Here is an example of an NEC DT terminal, the different names of the files. Some of the files are general, some of the files depend on the MAC address. Different brands have different number of files or naming convention, but Inform Voice takes care of the file naming and the contents of those files. So normally we don't need to worry about editing the files manually. There are certain circumstances in which we are going to do it, but it's not meant to be a common thing. Okay, so don't be scared about seeing all those files. The process goes kind of under the hood. Finally, we arrive to the step three. What is the contents of the configuration file when it comes to the SIP server or the SIP registrar? Well, that is being assigned in a tab specific to the brand that we find when we assign the station in Inform Voice Administration. So I'm showing you here three examples, one of a SNOM terminal, one of a Grandstream terminal, and one of a Molicom terminal. As you can see, the primary registrar address is here. I chose a name, it would be an FQDN, okay? Remember, I encourage you to get used to names. It will be useful in the future when we incorporate UC clients, SIP, soft phones, mobility. It will be much easier to deal with names than with IP addresses, believe me. And then we have this information, which is the transport. Sometimes for certain models of phones is kind of split in two different ways, and transport and DNS mode here. Here in for the Polycom terminal is just one again. The These parameters specify exactly how do we need to interpret this primary register. And let me show you how it is. When it comes to names, names need to be resolved to IP addresses. We don't enter the IP address directly because we don't want to marry the configuration to IP addresses. We want to leave it open in case of the IP address changes, but the name stays. But I mean, the device still needs an IP address to communicate. So it uses DNS and a DNS server to query the name and find out which is the IP address. So in case of a single UCM, a single SIP server, a single Inform Voice, which would be a very common case in case of small business, we can work pretty well with what we call an ADNS record. The ADNS record translates one name to one IP address. That's it. Very simple. So in the screen I showed earlier, you select a record and you eventually select the protocol you want, because some terminals accept TCP, some terminals only UDP. You select what you want. We can select TLS as well, but that involves encryption, and so it's a different story. But we deal with just one name and just one IP address. Very, very easy. Now, if we have more than UCM, which we will have even in a small business case in the near future, and our cousin, the cousin of the Inform Voice SMB, the Inform Voice under Windows already supports multiple UCMs. We want to provide survivability to the terminal, a possibility to reach a different SIP server in case of the first one fails. In this case, we cannot use an A record because it only translates to one IP address. We use a different record. There are two ways to deal with it. One is called NAPTR, and the other one is called SRV. Those types of records provide much more flexibility. So we define a name, and we through on that name we can assign priorities. So several servers and a priority. We can assign ports. We can do manipulation through regular expressions. There's a lot of things you can do with those um, types of records. We include documentation. We have a knowledge base on how to kind of assign those kind of records specifically to reach SIP servers, if you like. Um, Obviously, the internet is a big is a big source of information regarding that. But so I wanted to show you the possibility. I don't want to dive into how to create those records because it's not relevant at this time. It's better to keep it simple. But I want you to know that there is a possibility we can create survivability on the SIPS terminals using those kind of records. So with that, now you guys can connect terminals to Inform Voice. So good luck. Thank you for listening, and see you on the next video.